Putin has threatened to seize even more of Ukraine in order to defend its borders. On Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin hinted that he might give orders for Russian troops to try to seize more land in Ukraine in order to protect Russian border territory, a threat of dubious veracity given that the Kremlin does not have complete control over areas it has already annexed. The Russian leader made some of the most in-depth comments about the conflict in recent months, saying that Ukrainian forces had suffered catastrophic losses in a new counteroffensive and that he was not considering a new mobilization of troops despite widespread concern within Russia. However, he did not rule out the possibility of another call to arms in the future. And he repeated Russian accusations that Ukraine blew up a dam on the Dnieper River, leading to widespread flooding along the front last week. Following Kyiv's claims that Ukrainian troops had captured a handful of villages in the early stages of the counteroffensive, Putin made comments to a group of military journalists and bloggers in an open meeting. The Ukrainians are attempting to push Russian troops out of 4 regions of Ukraine that the Kremlin illegally annexed last fall. At least 11 people were killed overnight in Russian missile strikes in central Ukraine, prompting the meeting, which lasted more than 2 hours. Ukraine's counteroffensive has failed, according to Putin. He claimed that since the new assault began, Russia has lost 54 tanks while Ukraine has lost 160 tanks and over 360 other armored vehicles. Those assertions were not immediately checkable. Ukrainian authorities almost never make statements about tragedies. The White House did not respond right away to Putin's allegations. The public assessments made by Russia have been called not accurate by an American official who is familiar with American intelligence. The official, who spoke anonymously to provide an internal assessment, did not specify which of Putin's claims were false. Putin said he was considering whether to create on Ukrainian territory a kind of sanitary zone at such a distance from which it would be impossible to get our territory, referring to alleged incursions into Russia and shelling of border regions. It was unclear whether Russia could afford to risk expanding its gains in Ukraine while trying to repel the evolving counteroffensive in several sectors of the more than 1,000-kilometer, 600-mile front line. Russia had failed to capture Kyiv and its surroundings early in the war, and later had to give up other territory it had captured, even in annexed areas. The Kremlin has blamed Ukrainian forces for a recent uptick in attacks on Russian border regions, which have included incursions by fighters and drone strikes. Kyiv's involvement in the attacks has not been confirmed by Ukrainian authorities, but they have implicitly welcomed them. Volunteer units in Russia with a pro-Ukrainian bias have taken credit for the attacks. Officials on the ground in Russia have pleaded with the Kremlin to take additional measures to ensure the safety of locals, some of whom have already been relocated. Putin admitted that Russia's government should have been more prepared to prevent such attacks. Earlier in the war, the border was better protected because Russia held more adjacent Ukrainian territory, but last fall, under the weight of a Ukrainian counteroffensive, Russian forces withdrew from much of that territory. Putin's extended meeting with military bloggers and traditional news media war correspondents was a dramatic recognition of the importance of their role in communicating the Kremlin's perspective. Putin also made the following statements. Russia's defense industry has ramped up drone and weapon production, but more is needed. Meanwhile, the West is also having trouble meeting its own defense needs. It's possible that Russia will abandon a United Nations-backed agreement to let Ukraine ship grain through a demilitarized maritime corridor in the Black Sea. If the United States were to stop sending weapons to Ukraine, the country would be too depleted to continue fighting. The West will eventually come to terms with the fact that it cannot win in Ukraine. It's not going to happen in their lifetime. Never. A new $325 million aid package from the United States, including a variety of rockets, missiles, and other munitions, was announced for Ukraine while Putin was speaking. Putin made fun of the rumors that the Ukrainian military had lost high-tech Western equipment. He claimed that both Leopard battle tanks made in Germany and Bradley infantry fighting vehicles made in the United States are burning really well. On Tuesday morning, his defense ministry released a video purporting to show Ukrainian tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles that had been captured. Russian soldiers, the ministry claims, filmed the incident after heavy fighting in Zaporizhia. There was no quick way to check the video's legitimacy. Zelensky, one of Ukraine's top officials, has been just as adamant as Putin that his country will win the war and will not stop fighting until all of Ukraine is free of Russian control. In sharp contrast to Putin's optimistic assessment of Ukraine's counteroffensive, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg told President Joe Biden on Tuesday that the Ukrainians are making progress, which could strengthen their hand in future peace negotiations. Stoltenberg said at a White House meeting, "It's still early days, but what we do know is that the more land that Ukrainians are able to liberate, the stronger hand they will have at the negotiating table." On Tuesday, Ukrainian TV also heard from the country's deputy defense minister, Hanna Maliar, who said that the offensive was continuing in 4 areas to the south and east. Forces are moving forward outside of Bakhmut, in eastern Ukraine, according to the head of Ukraine's ground troops. According to a telegram post by Alexander Syrsky, Russian forces are losing positions on the flanks. Kryvyi Rih is the hometown of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and it was the target of a Russian missile strike overnight, according to Ukrainian authorities. At least 11 people were killed and 36 were injured. Zelensky posted photos on Telegram of firefighters battling a fire in a building with shattered windows after the most recent missile attack. There was a strewn field of charred and wrecked automobiles. "Even more terrorist missiles," he penned. Said another way, Russian killers continue their war against residential buildings, ordinary cities, and people. Russian Defense Ministry claimed that Russian forces used long-range air-launched cruise missiles to strike Ukrainian military reserves and depots storing Western weapons and ammunition, but did not specify where or when this took place. Serhiy Lysyk, governor of the Dnipropetrovsk region, reported on Telegram that 7 bodies were found in a warehouse belonging to a private company and that another 4 destinies were cut short in the apartment building.